Hey guys, Effie here. For this video, I am introducing our new Peony Dreams cluster stamp. This is a 5.75 by 5.75 inch photopolymer cluster stamp. So it's a really beautiful, large, gorgeous background. And what I'm going to do today is watercolor this using some Ken Oliver color burst. I started off by prepping my watercolor panel with some anti-static powder, and then I stamped the image with some clear embossing ink, and then I spooned on some gold embossing powder and then hit the whole panel with my heat tool, melting all of that beautiful powder, giving my image a nice metallic finish. Now I'm going to do some wet and wet watercoloring. I'm starting off by wetting this peony first. I'm going section by section, petal by petal. So I wet one section of petals with clean water using a medium tip water brush, and then I use a fine tip brush to add some peony color burst pigment into the inner corners of my petals. Then using my larger blending brush, I pulled some of that peony pigment out to the outer edges of my petal, getting a nice gradient within each petal. Since the peonies in this image are fairly large, I'm going to add a second color to add shading into the inner portions of my petal. So once I finish laying down my first layer of color, which is the peony color burst, I'm going to go back and add some wisteria to the inner portions of my larger petals. And this is going to give my peony a little bit more depth because I'm adding some shading. So I'm using the same technique that I used to apply the peony pigment, except I'm not really pulling the wisteria pigment all the way out to the edges of the petal. I really only want to add the wisteria to about a quarter of each petal, because if I end up pulling out the wisteria to the outer edges, it's just going to make my entire peony way too dark, and I want to make sure that some of that base layer pink is showing. When you're using two tones to color in a floral, you want to make sure that you're not overpowering one layer of color with another layer of color, unless that is the look that you're going for. But for me, I do want all colors that I'm using to shine through my painting. So once I'm finished watercoloring both of these large, beautiful peonies, I'm going to go ahead and start painting the leaves with some sap green color burst. So I wet the leaves with some clean water first, and then I applied some sap green pigment to the bottom portions of the leaves, and then I blended or pulled that sap green out to the edges of my leaf. For the shading of my leaves, I'll be using some Terre color burst, and I just added some extra powder to my palette by squeezing the squeeze bottles into my Terre watercolor well, and then I added a drop or two of clean water to the powder to activate the pigment. Then I picked up the pigment with my fine tip water brush, added a little bit of the Terre to each of the bottom portions of my leaves to add the shading to my leaves. Now I'm just going to continue this process until I'm finished painting my entire Peony Dreams cluster. Next, I colored in the tiny florals within this cluster image using some marigold color bursts. And since these images are not that large, I kind of just added the marigold pigment to each of these little tiny floral centers, and then I blended the color out with my larger brush. From this point on, my painting was completed fairly quickly because the areas of the smaller florals were definitely smaller. So I just kind of did some really quick loose watercoloring within each of these smaller images. Once my painting was complete, I just added a sentiment and my card is finished. I hope you guys will head on over to our blog to check out the rest of our May 2019 stamp release. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.